Hello and welcome to this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and as we end summer and get ready for fall, State Representative Tony Cabral is joining us in studio today. It's his turn in the rotation. Thanks for coming in. I've met the new colleagues.
You have,
They've
right?
all come in.
That's good. That's good.
Both of them, which is great. It's good to see them and introduce them to the show and what have you. Lots going on. It's been a busy coming up on the end of 9 months now. Obviously, the formal session is over. We're in the informal session for the year. Just your kind of overview of where we stand right now.
Well, I mean, the formal session will start again in the fall. We'll have formal sessions all the way through sometime, I think it's the first Wednesday of December this time. And then we go to a small recess, if you will.
Yeah.
And then we pick up again in January. Next year, the full formals technically end at the end of July, and then we go into a election period, right? That we'll still do business, but informal,
Right.
In case there are any things that need to be done, any emergencies or any things of that nature. But you know, things it's been busy. It's been the last 8 months or so. It's been really focused on the budget, focus on housing, focus on infrastructure. So there's been a lot of those so-called moving parts that we've done a lot of work on, both passing legislation to address the funding sources for those activities, and getting them at a point that we can see a faster or a bigger turnaround in terms of production of housing and other things.
I know that earlier in the budget process, I mean, there was talk about the funding and the funding sources, and that the monies weren't where they wanted to be. I don't know where we stand right now. I haven't seen too much on that right now. How are we budget-wise? Because I know last year, if I recall, the governor had to, freeze some things and what have you. How do we look financially right now in this new fiscal year? Because there's so many uncertainties.
There are still many uncertainties, most of them related to the federal government and the so-called big, beautiful bill. We still...
Medicaid's a huge issue.
Medicaid is big. It's big because Medicaid for us is Mass Health, right, in Massachusetts, and it's about $22 billion out of the budget. Some of that is reimbursed by the feds. That's why it's a big deal. We don't know how we're going to come down. Right now, the analysis are that potentially you're going to see a cut of about maybe 350,000 people and families might be impacted on that. But we don't have yet all the numbers.
It's still early because because the fiscal year has just started, so you don't.
Our fiscal year just started, but the federal fiscal year hasn't started.
Correct. It's
the new one.
October.
In October. Right. So once October starts, then we'll get a better sense, I believe, of where those numbers come down. The two big pieces is Medicaid, which everybody calls it Medicaid, we call Mass Health, and the other piece is SNAP, which the old food stamps, right?
Right.
Up to now, the majority of it's about, we from time to time, we have run some what's called state-based or state-funded SNAP, but that's very limited. Most of it is really federal funded, but the bill that was passed by Congress, the Donald Trump proposal, and the bill that eventually passed, the big, beautiful bill, will impact the states on that as well, because depending where the state is economically, the medium income and all that, all those measurements of all those numbers that is used to assess where each state is, we might have to pick up, the state might have to pick up a percentage of that has never happened before, right? It's always been primarily a responsibility of the federal government. And if we could have to pick up as much, some states will be like 4%, others 5%, 6%. Based on our economic numbers, it could be as much as 15, 16%. In addition, the administrative costs as well, because the state administers the program but gets funded to administer the program as well. So we still have to figure out those numbers.
Is the onus, though, does it come down to what Congress wants, in that there's going to have to be work requirements? People are going to have to, I don't want to say fend for themselves, but
the work
take care of themselves,
yeah.
really. I mean, the government can't be taking care of everybody. If you're able, you should be taking care of yourself and your family.
The work requirements, as far as we know right now, is around Mass Health, so around Medicaid.
Correct. Yep.
And then obviously we have to figure out where that falls. Some people, while on Medicaid, can't work, right? A lot of them are, some of them are disabled, some of them are elderly. But those who are able, and they'll be subject to some kind of work requirement. We don't know exactly what that means yet, and what kind of flexibility states have on that particular area. That's still being analyzed and tried to figure out where all those chips fall. But it will be a change, obviously. But I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of savings in the area of so-called work requirement in the healthcare industry, right? Mass Health is for primarily health issues. It's sort of a health insurance, if you will, for the poor and those that live within or under the poverty line. In Massachusetts, we go beyond that. We provide health care up to 300% of the poverty line.
But philosophically, though, is that going to have to change? Can the state afford to do that at this point in time?
It could. We don't know yet. It could change. And the other piece is the state also provides through the connector, right? So-called better, more affordable plans for folks who their employer might not provide, and they might have to go to the connector. Well, those so-called more affordable plans, they are more affordable because the state pays part of it, right? So the state so-called subsidizes it. So we're going to have to look at all those areas and see where it falls in terms of the requirements under the new bill, under the new federal legislation, and what can we really afford in Massachusetts, right?
Well, I was just going to say, too, because, the state is saying, the federal government, I should say, and I'm generalizing here, is saying we can't afford any more. That we've got to cut back. Agree or disagree, that's what's coming out of Washington right now.
I would put it in a different way.
No, but that's what they're saying.
They're choosing not to. It's not that they cannot afford. In order to provide the tax breaks that bill provides, you got to get savings someplace else.
Correct.
So you got to cut someplace else.
You're absolutely right. But they're saying that the tax breaks are more important than this. So the onus is falling more on the state and on the municipal governments too.
Right.
And I guess when you really think about it, at some point, there's only so much you can do at the state and local level to offset what the federal government's doing.
Well, that's what I think. What we have to really, I think, at some point we need to have a conversation, right? Being polite about it, right? About what is that the federal government should be providing or should be sharing with communities and with states, right? I mean, we've gone through this so-called cutback and changes what the feds provide and what they don't. During the Ronald Reagan period, for example, there used to be a program called revenue sharing with cities and towns, not with the state, directly with cities and towns. In 1980, which was the last that was changed after that, right? That was eliminated, actually, right? The city of New Bedford used to receive $10 million just from that program from the feds, directly to the city. Mm-hmm. You know what that means today? Those $10 million today would be?
Yeah, that's a lot more, yeah.
Would be maybe almost $100 million, right? What that would do for the city and to relieve property tax pressure that we have in other cities, not just New Bedford. So that went away. They used to provide up to 90% of funding for secondary treatment plants, for example, like ours in New Bedford. That went away. They created a so-called block grant, and that went away before we built our own. The biggest public infrastructure in New Bedford was the secondary treatment plant, all on our own, all on the water users and sewer users of New Bedford, the taxpayers of the city of New Bedford, right? 100% of it rather than 10%. So that has been going on now for decades. And so the pressure is building, and this adds additional pressure both at the state level and at the local level. You know, I mean, because there are also other programs that are going to be you're going to see cuts that are directly come to the city, like community development, right? All and others, right? So we really have to. Is the federal government only going to be in the business of national defense? If they are, then we don't need to send all that money that we send to the Fed. We can keep it here and do the things that we need to do.
Correct. And I don't disagree with you that. I just think that the philosophy right now in Washington is that we want tax breaks, we want, quote, more money in taxpayer pockets. But you're correct that if you have less money, there's going to be less services. And there's more pressure on states and municipalities. And listen, I mean, the city council, when they were just doing their budget, said that the budget's too high and taxes are too high and we need to cut. So they did cut. And I know that local aid, something you've been working on, local aid was a huge issue during the budget process, that the state doesn't provide as much local aid percentage-wise as they did years ago.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we've been trying to fix that. And I'm going to continue working on that. As a matter of fact, in September, or early fall, I should say, we are going to bring cities together, part of the so-called MMA organization, but the city part, the city organizations, not the small communities.
I was going to say, you do the gateway. You're part of the gateway cities.
I'm part of the gateway cities. Yeah, I chair that caucus on the House side. But we're going to invite the mayors of the so-called Mayors Association that are part of the MMA to really start this conversation. Most of the cities, obviously, are gateway cities. To start this conversation, how can we change the formula that attributes local aid, the so-called unrestricted local aid? Because it's unfair. Communities like New Bedford get very little compared to others. So we need to restructure that formula. Well, I mean, that formula has been in place since the 70s and 80s after the Proposition 2.5, right?
Oh, yeah,
so
I thought it was 80s after
right.
Prop 2.5.
Prop 2.5.
Yeah.
But even then, that's been merged, both of those. As you remember, after Proposition 2.5, the state implemented the so-called additional assistance that was part of the local aid. Used to be so-called the lottery aid and the local assistance. That's been merged and it's called now unrestricted local aid. And that was done in fiscal year 2009 initially, because the state, and obviously the state had to balance its own budget. How did it balance its own budget? By cutting local aid. And that's what happened. And leaving in place a formula that's really not a formula anymore, right? That needs to be reformed. And the only way to do it, I think, is to get communities together and work together with us in the legislature. And eventually the administration has to come on board to really address that issue. It needs to be addressed because cities like New Bedford and others, Fall River, Taunton, you name them, right? Brockton, and so forth, really, if that formula is changed, will gain millions of dollars annually.
But you'll have those on the other side saying, we can't afford it.
But we can, because the way we are proposing, the way I've been proposing, is that we hold harmless whatever each community is getting now, right? And then we move forward with this. Could be a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan, or a 7-year plan. I would like a 7-year plan rather than 5 or 10. I think it's more realistic. And then any new additional money that goes into that line item then gets funneled through or filtered through a new formula that is skewed towards those that have greater need, right? And then eventually, at the end of that 7-year period, for example, then everybody will end up more or less equal in terms of its percentage that they get, including those that were held harmless, right?
But you're going to end up, but even no matter what the solutions, aren't you going to be taking monies out of someplace else?
No, we're gonna, it's the additional money of revenue that we collect that we believe we can put towards local aid. Right now, in the last few years, it's been around between 30 to 38, $39 million of additional money that goes into that line item, right? Right now, that additional money just goes in.
What, to the rainy day fund?
That's not from the rainy day fund.
It doesn't go into, okay.
No, that's revenue. Sort of it's the way it's been calculated in the last few years, starting with the previous administration, Charlie Baker administration, is about 3% of the revenue growth, right?
So where does that money go right now, though? You're saying it's being collected, the 38 whatever million dollars. Where is that being spent right now in the budget?
That gets divvied out to all the communities through unrestricted local aid.
Okay.
So but the problem is the formula is really not a formula. So those who get more end up getting more of that pot, of that pie, piece of pie, right? Example, this past fiscal year.
And you got to kind of take Boston out of it because it's so big.
No, we cannot take Boston out of it. We have to include Boston. We have to hold Boston harmless if we were to implement a new formula, right? So they don't lose, but they're not going to gain at a faster pace versus other communities.
So it's not based on population or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
I mean, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston actually has done a study on this, and they've done a white paper on it. And if we were to use let's say the formula that they propose on that white paper, it talks about 7 to 10 year period, like we did with the Student Opportunity Act, right? We reformed the Chapter 70 formula to address specific needs, such as English language learners, as economic disadvantaged children.
That was only a couple years ago, too.
It's already on this fourth, fifth.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I think it was that long, yeah.
And it was a 7-year period, right? So the communities that got a bigger chunk, or is getting a bigger chunk of that, is places like New Bedford. New Bedford this year, for this school year, it's going to start now, is going to get an additional $17 million on top of what they got last year. So it's 252 or around 250 some $1 million for Chapter 70, right? $17 million more. That's because of the new formula, right? Because it takes in consideration 4 factors, right? It takes in consideration English language learners, takes in consideration economically disadvantaged children, right, and families, takes special needs, kids, and healthcare, the cost of healthcare in that system, right? So obviously, places like New Bedford versus Newton, or versus Wellesley, right, or even versus Dartmouth, is substantially different. Where we've been getting a lot now for the last 4 or 5 years already. So what I think we need to do with local aid is a similar approach, right? In which we hold harmless everybody, period. Everybody gets sort of frozen in time in that sense of what they were getting. They will get at least that amount. And then any new money will be through a new formula that will be distributed based on greater need and less ability to raise, right? Because that's the other thing the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston in their study said is there are communities such as Boston, they have a lot more options to raise their own revenue. Example, every time a plane gets fueled in Boston, there's gas tax.
Yeah, but just simple.
It goes to Boston, right? It doesn't go to New Bedford, doesn't go anyplace else.
Your hotel, your meal tax,
That's
all
right.
that stuff.
All of that stuff,
yeah.
right? That we don't have, New Bedford doesn't have that ability because we don't have that kind of infrastructure, that kind of structure. So that has to be taken into consideration when you put a formula together. So I think it's going to take some time to get everybody on board, but I think once we get everybody's attention, everybody on board, I think that's the way to go.
Let me, we got about 8 minutes here. I just want to touch base on a couple of things. A lot of infrastructure projects right now in New Bedford taking place. You've got the Route 18 195 project already underway. That's a state project. I know we've been talking about State Pier for a while. The New Bedford Fairhaven Bridge is past the design phase, in my understanding, and hasn't started. I don't think they're going to start it until...
They got to get to 25% design.
Well, my understanding too was
Yeah.
I thought Route 18 and 195, they didn't want to bottleneck two ways to get into the city
Right.
either.
Yeah, but I think the way it's working in terms of what needs to still be done, the planning, the design, and all that for the bridge, I think it will not run into the problem with
Right.
Route 18 and 195. Because Route 18 and 195, I know everybody's talking about it's a 5-year project. I'm hoping that we can do it in less than 5 years. And how do you do that, right? Is adding a shift, at least one shift, to the work. Rather than just doing one shift, maybe have two shifts. How do you add the second shift? It requires probably additional revenue, additional funding. So we have to see if that would be possible, especially the federal money that we would get for transportation.
And that's a $1 million
right?
question, yeah.
Right?
Literally more than $1 million
But how do
question.
you cut back on the time? It is by having more work being done each day, right? It's like having a factory run on one shift or two shifts or three shifts.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if you get more shifts, you get more done.
Get more done. So, and if we have a second shift, that's usually at night, right? It's a little more costly running things at night than during the day. So it's something I will certainly look at it, and the delegation is looking at if there's even that possibility. And then in the meantime, the planning and the design will still go in terms of the bridge, and then we'll be ready by then to really begin something at that point.
It just shows that there's a lot of
Yeah.
infrastructure. There is money being spent in the city for really 3 big infrastructure projects when you really think about it.
Yeah, and you have the state pier, and one that people don't see, don't talk about, has been going on now for several years, and there's still a little bit more of that to be done, is the dredging of the harbor.
Yeah.
$35 million state money. I earmarked that on the House side, and that is given the ability for some of the piers, especially the private piers. And I want to clarify, the private owner of any pier, if we dredge in that area, they have to pay a percentage of the dredging that actually impacts
Their pier.
Their pier.
Property, yeah.
So there is private funding in a sense for that, right? So it's their responsibility. But I think that's important to do. The harbor has not been dredged for over 50, 60 years or more.
And there's just more action taking place in the harbor right now with everything that's been going on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in addition, of course, you have the fishing industry that we have. We're really the hub of that industry in the Northeast, right? I mean, Gloucester is very small at this point. Plymouth or Provincetown. We really, even you have a lot of boats coming from the Carolinas and New Jersey and everything else coming in because the services they need in terms of welding or other activities or the motors or whatever it might be, all that support services is here and not necessarily in the other ports.
I mean, the harbor is what separates this city from other gateway cities.
Yeah,
There's no question.
There's no question, yeah. And the best way to see what's going on in the harbor is really it's by boat. Right? Take a boat,
Correct, yeah.
a harbor tour by the water, right, in the water. You'll be amazed. There's a lot of work being done, a lot of investment being done, some of that federal money as well,
I wanted to touch base before we go, and it's not an issue that impacts us here yet, but I know it's been in the national news when you talk about Texas and California and other states looking to redistrict half year. I know that the state just did it a few years ago with the census, and it's supposed to be every 10 years. But I know Massachusetts has been getting thrown in there because they say it's gerrymandered, it's fixed, what have you. I just kind of get your thoughts on that. I mean, I guess the argument they're using is, 39% of the state voted for President Trump, and there's no Republicans in anything. But I also read a thing that said that it'd be pretty hard to redistrict because of the population, what they require for a district. You're going to need a city in most of the districts, and that's going to be hard to make things happen.
Right.
I guess your thoughts.
Well, first, it's unfortunate that what they've done in Texas at this point, try to redistrict in the middle of the decade, right? It's supposed to be a 10-year process after the census gets done. we're supposed to go back and restructure the districts according to the population that was done and counted by the census, the 10-year census. That's what the Constitution calls for.
Yeah.
Now, this is really going out of the rule. I mean, it's really in a sense, sort of a violation of the rules and the norm of how we do things in terms of creating congressional districts or even state level at the state legislature.
It affects both.
Affects both. So it's unfortunate. Now, Massachusetts, I know people can talk about it. Yeah, just because Trump might have gotten 39% of the vote in the state, it doesn't mean that the districts, if we're to actually restructure those, again, that would be called gerrymandering as well, right? To include or try to get more communities that are more conservative, if you will, or vote more conservatively into a district. It would be almost impossible to do without gerrymandering. It's already, some of the districts are already a little weird.
Yeah.
Because I would say we need a district that is South Coast based, right? We don't have a South Coast based district.
A congressional district.
Congressional district,
yeah.
right? Everybody, it's coming all out of Boston, sort of, if you will. So I would say, I think that's more important than trying to carve out advantages for one party versus the other. I think it's important that a region has, like Lowell has one, right?
Well, I know that this city, you guys, since I've been around, the legislature and the mayors and people have been talking about that. New Bedford and Fall River and certainly southeastern Mass should be in one district, and it never has been. Not even close, really.
Not even close,
I guess
right?
It's closer now than it has been, but it's still not.
Yeah, so I think right now, I mean, the way it is, we have to wait for the next census. I think that's the proper way of doing it. And I believe when that comes around, that based on the numbers, and because the congressional districts are even more difficult to draw than the state districts. Because the state districts, you can have a 5% deviation either way. The federal districts, you cannot. It has to be a person, to a person, right?
Yeah.
The count has to be to a person, meaning if you have to go across the street just to pick up one house to get that number, you have to do that, right? So I think after the next census, then we'll take another look at it. I mean, this last census that we did and the last redistricting that we did at the state level, there was a lot of changes to taking consideration population, such as Latino population or African American population and others, making sure the districts were done in a way that was inclusive. So in the future, those communities can elect representatives as well. I mean, look at Lawrence today.
Yeah. We got to leave it at that right now.
Yeah.
Lots to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's
great seeing you.
We haven't got out of the weeds in this case, right? We just talk about all this infrastructure stuff. So thank you very much for having me again.
Good stuff. Good seeing you as always.
Hopefully next time we'll expand on other issues, you know.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.